The time is finally here. I've been making videos on videos of the full timeline of Five Nights at Freddy's and my process for making my own in-depth timeline. And like I mentioned at the start, I'm going to be using the bulletin board I made about more than a year ago when I tried to make a timeline without using any books, just the games up until Ultimate Custom Night. But because of what I just said, you realize this bulletin board is lacking in a lot of information. So why don't we make this bulletin board bigger? And now, let's add stuff to it. On today's video, we will be going over all the lore that I can pluck out from Help Wanted that I think is relevant for the timeline, and I'll be putting it on this board. I'll also be touching on Five Nights at Freddy's Special Delivery, the AR app, because after all, Help Wanted and Special Delivery kind of go hand in hand. Of course, we'll be adding Security Breach Ruin and Help Wanted 2 as well, but they'll get their own videos because I have a feeling this is going to take a while for these games. So for now, Slices, put on your aprons and let's do some lore scouting. And just one quick reminder, this bulletin board and its entire purpose is just to document factual evidence from the games with zero speculation. I think it's really important to ground yourself in what we know for a fact before we start speculating. So that's the purpose of this board. There's going to be things that we're all pretty 99% sure of, like the name Glitch Trap, that I won't be putting on this board for that very reason. Now, in case it's been a while since you've played Help Wanted, and to be fair, that game came out 5 years ago, almost to the day. Like, it's crazy how close this is coming out to the 5-year anniversary of Help Wanted. But I figured it's best to re-go over the story of the game and to refresh everybody so we're working on an even playing field. After all, back when we did the bulletin board for the Scott games, up until Sister Location, there wasn't really a story to go over, so we were able to do 2, 3, 4 games in one video because we just did the bullet points of lore. But Help Wanted onward, literally every single game has some semblance of a story. So we should go over them even if we don't directly put that story on the bulletin board. The story of Five Nights at Freddy's Help Wanted is very meta, actually. An in-universe Five Nights at Freddy's VR game is being made, and it just got sent to our company, which we are a video game tester at. And it's our job to make sure the game is playable and ready to be launched. But as we make our way through the video game, we find these glitchy cassette tapes that the previous game tester left in the files. As we play the game and collect them, we learn that these tapes were left to document what was going on behind the scenes of Fazbear and that previous company, and document what was going on within the game itself. After all, they warn us of something that the girl who recorded them calls the anomaly. And as we collect these tapes, that anomaly we're being warned about grows stronger, more clearly visible, and closer to us. As it comes into view, it appears to be a stitched together felt costume styled to look like a yellow Bonnie. And that's much of the game. You play these mini-games and you collect tapes to then see this image more clearly. Playing through the games, we encounter 3 different endings, well, kind of 4. The main basic ending you get if you beat every single minigame and every single hard mode version of those minigames, after which you unlock something called Pizza Party. It's a weird, confusing maze of a level where you're going through all these different set pieces, and eventually you get to the end, where your reward is the back room of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, or at least something that looks like it. The curtain moves and you're beckoned behind the curtain by the anomaly, and it's here that you can get one of 2 endings. The main ending here, and the only ending with this branch for quite some time, is you listen to the anomaly and go behind the curtain. And once you do, it fades to black, and it fades up, and the anomaly is dancing to the Freddy's game performing a song, and you realize you're looking from the perspective of Freddy Fazbear. The implication here being that you got stuffed into the Freddy Fazbear animatronic suit. However, when the Curse of Dreadbear DLC launched, another ending was added to this game. In this room, there's a fire exit that opens up and snow comes in of. If you go out that door, you can see the Pizzaplex being built across the street, and you're just in the middle of nowhere in the snow. Notably, this does imply that the Pizzaplex is built in the middle of nowhere surrounded by trees. The third possible ending is available if you collect every single hidden cassette tape in the games, in which the last one gives you the instructions to access this ending, where essentially you are warned that now that you've collected all the tapes, anytime you enter the lobby, there's a random chance that the anomaly will try to merge with your mind, and the tape gives us instructions that if we press a button, turn a lever, and I think pull a crank, essentially we can eliminate the anomaly. Once this eventually does happen, you have two choices. You either listen to those instructions or you don't. If you don't listen to the instructions or you do it incorrectly, you'll see your perspective begin to shift with the anomaly until you're looking at yourself at the computer. And then the game fades to black and you get the game over screen. Presumably, the anomaly took over your mind, and you're just put right back in the game. However, if you do the steps correctly, it doesn't get much better. Instead, you're transported into this metal doored room with a lock and handprints of someone trying to escape, and then the slide opens up to reveal the anomaly on the other side, who shushes you and fades into the darkness. It's escaped, essentially. That's ending number 3. But I mentioned we kind of have 4 endings. The Curse of Dreadbear DLC added something that feels very final, like another ending almost. Essentially, after the 3rd ending, you get a plushie of the anomaly that's all glitchy and messed up. And in the Curse of Dreadbear DLC, there's a corn maze where you collect a key and find a matching gate to leave. However, if you collect all 4 keys and then one final secret 5th key, and then make it back to the center of the maze, you can get under a secret hatch, and inside is a workshop with a white rabbit mask. You collect that mask and then you can summon it in the lobby. Once in the lobby, if you hold that glitchy anomaly plush and put on that rabbit mask, you'll hear our player having a conversation with the anomaly. Now, you can't hear the anomaly speaking, you can only hear yourself speaking, but we hear her say this.
Yes, I hear you. I know. No. There's no miscommunication. I understand. Yes, I have it. I made it myself. I think you would like it. No one suspects anything. Don't worry. I'll be ready. And I won't let you down. It will be fun.
While yes, it's technically speculation, I think it is incredibly safe to assume that the thing she made is this rabbit mask and perhaps a full costume, and that the anomaly is preparing us for something. So that's the story of Help Wanted 1. But what lore from this game is relevant to the timeline and we should put on the bulletin board? Well, let's go over that. A lot of the important lore of this game comes from the cassette tapes that you can collect while playing. But instead of just playing all 16 cassette tapes, you can find that elsewhere on YouTube, we'll just go over the important points. First of all, one incredibly important piece of lore, possibly the most important piece of lore from this game that affects the whole timeline and the bulletin board itself, one of the tapes lets us know that the whole purpose of the in-universe FNAF VR game that we are playing is Fazbear's attempt to make fun of itself and make light of the past after a rogue indie developer made a series of games tarnishing the brand. Essentially, it's Fazbear being like, yes, haha, we get it, we're kind of scary, look, let's leave that in the past and move on. But one of the tapes lets us know that Fazbear themselves hired that indie developer to make those games based off of real events in order to discredit those claims and do some elaborate cover-up. Well, bye. So we'll mark both of those down, that the indie games exist and that this VR game exists, both of which are an elaborate cover-up to cover up the past. We should also note what I said earlier, that most of the lore comes from the perspective of the previous game tester of these games. Other information we get from those logs is that Fazbear sent over old, or as is said differently in emails we'll get to, vintage technology to scan into the system to find some kind of usable code. And they do, but after doing so is when the anomaly began to show. Much of you already know this as the story of the creation of Glitchtrap, but again, this bulletin board is just directly stated or shown information about the games. So technically, they never say Glitchtrap in this game. I won't be saying it on this section of the bulletin board. The first tester, Jeremy, lost his mind while dealing with the anomaly, culminating in some sort of incident. Now, we don't get any specific details about what happened, but these are the quotes that illuminate what most likely took place.
There has to be a lawsuit. There's no way there isn't. It happened in this building just a few doors down from me. Have you ever heard of a guillotine paper slicer? It sounds made up, but it's an actual piece of office equipment. I didn't even know we had one in the supply room. Jeremy used to do design work. I guess that's how he knew it was there. The supply room was lit. I didn't even notice Jeremy standing in the testing room as I walked past. The supply room was so bright, glowing from all the way down the hall. There was something that looked like a Halloween mask laying on the floor. I didn't understand. Ink must have spilled. I couldn't see his face. He had the visor covering his head. He had ink spilled on himself as well. The front of his shirt looked black in the dark room.
Yeah, this is a big point of speculation. For a while, I thought that Jeremy cut off his own face to get out of the VR helmet. But that doesn't quite make sense for a few reasons. First of all, the Halloween mask and ink that the cassette girl first sees is in a brightly lit room. You would think if it's a human face and blood, she would have known. I can excuse the ink on Jeremy being blood because he's in a dark room, she can't really fully see him. But ink on the ground in a brightly lit room has to be ink, so is all of it ink? Well then what's the Halloween mask? Why did he need the guillotine paper slicer? I'm not sure. Not to mention, if he cut off his own face to get the VR helmet off, why is he still wearing it after his face is on the ground? Like, it just doesn't add up. Regardless, something happened with the guillotine paper slicer that led to a lawsuit, or what was supposed to be a lawsuit. Moving on, it's important to note that Fazbear reclaimed all of the technology that was scanned into the game after it had been scanned in, overnight seemingly and without permission. It just disappeared one day. As we collect the log cassette tapes, she notes that the anomaly begins attaching itself to them, forming an anchor into the game for itself. But when she notices this, she makes the decision to fragment her logs in order to keep the anomaly at bay, essentially splitting up its pieces so it can't be put back together. And then she records one additional log, a new one reintroducing herself and warning us to either abandon development or make sure these tapes are not found and put back together. So it's notable that the last tape completely changes course and says to collect all of the tapes and follow specific instructions. Many people believe this tape to be recorded by the anomaly. Now, I won't be putting that speculation on the bulletin board, but what we can put on the board is that the last tape completely changes course and tells you to do something different, and that the first words we hear the anomaly say are direct copy, or mimic, hint hint, of the first tape we hear.
Hello? Can you hear me?
Then further, for information on the anomaly, like I mentioned earlier, it resembles a felt suit styled to look like a yellow Bonnie, and it grows more clear and closer to the player the more tapes we collect. It should also be noted that even after we destroyed the anomaly, we're able to have a conversation with it as the player. And it also seems like the anomaly is preparing us for something. And that's the main lore of Help Wanted, but there is a lot more lore to go over still. Mainly lore just from the game and context itself. For instance, we know that this VR game is based off of in-universe indie games based off of the company. But by using the titles of certain games, the locations, characters, and even gameplay, we can assume these indie games are essentially FNAF 1 through 6, like the IRL FNAF 1 through 6. 1, 2, and 3 are fairly straightforward. Their titles are literally in-game. 4 makes a lot of sense because Night Terrors is essentially recreations of gameplay of FNAF 4. Next, I hear you, what about Sister Location and Pizzeria Simulator? Sister Location gets tricky because we don't have a lot of direct recreations of Sister Location gameplay, but what we do see is Ennard show up 2 times. By all accounts, Ennard should have only ever been seen by Michael. It's something that forms in the Sister Location bunker away from public view, enters Michael, and then escapes into the sewers when his body falls apart. Only Michael should know about this creature. So the fact that it's in-game and faithfully recreated implies that it is a Fazbear character. And if it's a Fazbear character, then that would mean this game has to exist, because how else would the public know about Ennard? The same logic can apply for Pizzeria Simulator. There is no gameplay of Pizzeria Simulator shown in Help Wanted. However, there is a plushie of Scrap Baby. Scrap Baby again being a character that isn't a real Fazbear character. It's the result of Circus Baby trying to rebuild herself after splitting off from Ennard. And it's something that only Henry, Michael, and maybe a few other people should have seen, not a well-known Fazbear character that has merchandise. So if that character is known to the public, that implies Pizzeria Simulator is a game. And that's doubled down with the books that we will get to, but in those books, Pizzeria Simulator is literally name dropped. So you know. But I hear that some of you think I'm saying Help Wanted is saying every game before now is fake and you shouldn't listen to it. And I'm not saying that, and neither is Help Wanted. It should be noted, and I'm putting it on the bulletin board, that Cassette Girl literally explicitly states that these games were recreations of real events that did happen. It's not saying these games didn't happen. What I think Help Wanted is trying to tell us in this moment, and I think it's pretty explicit, so I'm willing to put it on the bulletin board, is that these games did happen. However, they are made by an unreliable narrator, so certain details might not be accurate. The meta of this is that I think Steelwell and Scott are telling us, hey, we want to continue this story, but if something we say currently contradicts something we said previously, trust the current over the original 6 games. I think that's all that this is saying, and I think that's a fair ask. Keep in mind, some of these games are 10 years old and were made in 3 months, you know? Some other interesting lore that we should point out can be found within actual levels of the game. In the blacklight mode of Entered Vent Repair, there is a furnace at the bottom of the level, outside of which there are Funtime animatronic shells, and inside are Endo 01 and Endo 02 endoskeletons. Somebody separated that pile to find about 4 animatronics worth. I think this is incredibly important, but I will keep my mouth shut until we get there. I did make a whole video about specifically that you can watch right here though. The pizza party level is strange and worth pointing out. I mean, I'm not sure even if this is the intended original ending for the in-universe Five Nights at Freddy's VR. It literally might be something created by the anomaly. After all, it's more of a rehash of other things already present in the game and some weird warehouse bits. It's almost like it was mimicking the game. And finally, for Help Wanted, the Curse of Dreadbird DLC takes place within Fall Fest of 1983. This is a completely new event that we still have little to no information on, but it's worth pointing out that this depiction of Fall Fest takes place next to a large red lake surrounded by trees with the FNAF 4 house in the distance, and that Dreadbear can be seen leaving the lake and entering the barn. So that's all the relevant lore I could pluck out of Help Wanted, but we are not done yet. Like I mentioned at the beginning, there's another game with lore that's relevant to bring up now, because what it lacks in quantity of lore, it makes up for in quality. FNAF Special Delivery AR has a lot of incredibly important lore, but it's lore that goes hand in hand with Help Wanted and Security Breach, and outside of this lore, there's not much else here. So there's like 4 points, but they are incredibly important points, and they come from Dark Circus and the emails. Now, I've made a full video on the Dark Circus, which you can watch right here, but in that video, I didn't talk about the emails because I wasn't focusing on it. Now it's time. As you play Five Nights at Freddy's Special Delivery, or as you could have played before the game was shut down and unplayable now, Forsaken's pretty good though, you can unlock specific emails that were supposed to stay within Fazbear and their subcontractors. Luckily, even though the game has been shut down, people have already compiled all of these emails along with emails that were never shown to the public, but were probably essentially planned to be, but never ended up getting to be. These emails sort of fall into one of 3 categories. The first one being emails from Lewis to someone named Ness, whose email is Nessie97. Lewis is in HR, and throughout these emails, it's pretty clear that he has a crush on his coworker named Ness, who we can almost for a fact assume is Vanessa. After all, Lewis implies later that she goes by VA, and she fills in the role of the Vanessa from Security Breach and the Vanessa from Help Wanted very cleanly. By the way, it's these emails that let us know our player from Help Wanted is almost certainly Vanessa. In these emails, it seems that Vanessa is switching between 2 personalities, one where she's herself and one where she is Vanny, someone we'll get to know in Security Breach, but essentially the part of her mind that is controlled by the anomaly. We also learn that she's behind another set of emails between what we assume to be the Help Wanted team. Corroborating information with what we've heard in the tapes, these emails document when the Help Wanted team originally received the Fazbear technology, scanned it in, and got what they called the virus. It's this strange virus that begins taking over things and making things act differently. We can assume this to be the anomaly from Help Wanted. Luckily, someone from the IT of Fazbear going by V_A comes in and isolates the virus to one location, and then after some time removes the virus. All of the workers are thankful and celebratory, but suddenly get worried when all of their access to their systems have been locked out as well, to the point where they begin emailing from their phone because they can't even log into their computers. So we'll put a pin in there that happened, but that's not all. Lewis later tells us more info, and we get an email showing this happening. It's implied inside this NES, using VA as a login with the Pizzaplex inputs the package of this virus into the Pizzaplex system. So when we take a step back, these emails from Special Delivery literally directly tell us how Vanessa got the anomaly into the Pizzaplex system. She pretended to be Fazbear IT and isolated the anomaly from Help Wanted and extracted the virus, and then inputted the virus to the Pizzaplex systems and bypassed the security to get it into the actual computers. And then the anomaly was free to infect the entire Pizzaplex. So put a big old pin in there. Some other information we can get is how we know pretty much for a fact that this VA/NES is Vanessa, because another email detailing workers, their birthdays, and their favorite cakes lists someone by Vanessa A, age 23, whose favorite cake is bunny-shaped cakes. That's pretty cut and dry. But notably, she's 23, and her username is Nessie97, which implies she was born in 1997. So this also implies these emails are taking place in 2020. That's very important, because a lot of people, and at different times in my life, myself included, have believed FNAF 3 takes place in 2023. After all, it's stated to be on the 30th anniversary, and we're fairly certain FNAF 1 takes place probably around 93. So 1993 plus 30, 2023. However, if these emails take place in 2020, that means FNAF 3 can't take place in 2023. FNAF 3 has to take place a long time before these emails occur. After all, FNAF 3 happens, then FNAF 6 happens, then the whole PR stunt with the indie games happen, then Help Wanted happens, and during Help Wanted and after Help Wanted is when these emails take place. So when does FNAF 3 take place? Well, I think the best runner-up option for us is 2013. We know for a fact that Freddy Fazbear's Pizza was established in 1983. That's what the coin says, that's what the TV in FNAF 4 says, it just makes a lot of sense. And if Freddy Fazbear's Pizza opened in 1983, then 2013 would be a 30th year anniversary of Freddy Fazbear's. So that wraps it up with a nice bow. FNAF 3 takes place in 2013, and then FNAF 6 can't take place in 2023 either. I, for a long time, assumed FNAF 6 took place in 2023 because the log was HRY223. So like, cool, that's our date, it lines up with FNAF 3. Now it doesn't. So, I mean, maybe that's just the 223rd log that Henry left while doing this. I don't know, but you know, FNAF 6 takes place sometime in between 2013 and 2020. We'll figure more about that when we think about it. Oh, and before we end, I'm just gonna put one old big pin for all of the Dark Circus. Again, I made a whole video on it. It probably has something to do with Fredbear and Fall Fest, but you know, the Dark Circus. And that's all the pertinent timeline lore I could think of from Help Wanted and Special Delivery. And again, this is just direct information from the games without any speculation. We will be adding a lot more to this timeline besides just the cards on this bulletin board. This is just the foundation we set before we start building our house. That being said, if you want to know what other speculation and information we've decided on about these games, I've made a whole timeline documenting every single video pertinent to making this timeline, which you can watch right here. It's the playlist. I hope I said playlist and not timeline. I don't know. I like that take. I'm sticking with it. But if you want your fan art featured on the channel, make sure to use #RightTart so I can find it. A huge shout out to the best channel members, the Dough Risers, and until next time, as always, stay toasty, slices.